Hello and welcome to A Photographic Life. I hope you had a good summer. I hope you've had some time off, maybe some time at the beach or something like that. I know I have, and I've tried to come back to the podcast with a fresh and refreshed view of photography. Only you will be able to judge whether or not that's true. Anyway, a few things, as always, that have caught my eye over the past few weeks and I'd like to share with you. One of them is a YouTube channel. YouTube seems to be the place to go nowadays, doesn't it? So much good stuff on there. It's not just about people making memes and kind of funny films and so forth. There's really good cultural reference, I find, on there. Anyway, one of the things I do enjoy might be a little bit too fashion for some of you, but I'm going to try it on you anyway, which is the fashion designer Bella Freud, of course, one of the many children of artist Lucian Freud. And Bella Freud has a channel called Fashion Neurosis, in which she gets different people, primarily from a fashion background, but also from music, and also a particularly good one with the writer Hanif Qureshi. And she gets them into her own apartment. They lay down on the couch, and I suppose continuing the Freudian aspect in her family, she asks a series of questions, of that person. Well, recently I was watching it. There's some really good ones, actually, I have to say. And perhaps surprisingly, Kate Moss was a particularly good one, which I really enjoyed. But anyway, Nick Knight, the photographer, featured in a recent episode. You can find that, as I say, Fashion Neurosis on YouTube. And Nick's an interesting character. I first met him, it would have been, I think, the late 1980s when I commissioned him to photograph Malcolm McLaren. He turned up with just one light, shot it in black and white, all very simple, very straightforward. Anyway, Nick, I think, is great. Showstudio.com, absolutely essential for any image maker to check out. But Nick was talking about lots of different things, and a couple of things he mentioned I thought worth sharing. He talked about really the humbling failure. The first image, he says, is never any good, and it forces you to go deeper. He says he starts with failure. You have to go through hell to see things you never knew you would see. Perception, intuition, feelings. He also talks about melodic constructions, looking for a melodic harmony within his photography, and describes photography as sound. Now, you may or may not be aware of Nick Knight. You may have an impression that you think you know Nick Knight's work. You might not. There's no doubt that he is at the leading edge of experimentation, but intrinsically, he's just a great photographer. So, Nick Knight was somebody who got me to think over the summer. Fashion Neurosis is where I'm going to point you to see if he does the same for you. Something else that caught my eye over the summer was an American Masters film on the photographer Garry Winogrand. Now, I get the feeling that most people engaged with photography will understand the word Garry Winogrand and associate it. It's the word, the name, isn't it? But just it would come with associations. But I wonder how many people really know very much about him. So I'm just going to give you a quick pen portrait here, just to fill in some of the facts and the details. Anyway, a photographer, curator, historian and critic, John Swarkowski, called Winogrand the central photographer of his generation. He received 3 Guggenheim Fellowships to work on personal projects, a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, and he published 4 books during his lifetime. He was one of 3 photographers featured in the influential New Documents exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1967, and he had solo exhibitions there in 1969, 77 and 88. He supported himself by working as a photojournalist freelance and also as an advertising photographer in the 1950s and 60s. And he also then went on to teach photography in the 1970s. In his lifetime, Winogrand published 4 monographs: The Animals in 1969, Women Are Beautiful in 1975, Public Relations in 1977, and Stock Photographs, the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show and Rodeo in 1980. At the time of his death, his late work remained undeveloped, with approximately 2,500 rolls of undeveloped film, 6,500 rolls of developed but not proofed exposures, and 3,000 rolls only realised as far as contact sheets being made. In 1964, as I say, Winogrand was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, and he used that to travel for photographic studies of American life. In 1966, he exhibited at the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York, as I said, with Friedlander, Michaels, Bruce Davison and Danny Lyon in an exhibition entitled Toward a Social Landscape, curated by Nathan Lyons. In 1967, his work was included in the influential New Documents, and that was alongside Diana Arbus Lee Friedlander. His second Guggenheim Fellowship he used to explore the effect of the media on events, through the then novel phenomenon of events created specifically for the mass media. Between 1969 and 1976, he photographed at public events, producing 6,500 prints that were edited down for a solo exhibition at MoMA and book, and that was the book Public Relations. In 1975, his high-flying reputation took a self-inflicted hit. At the height of the feminist revolution, he produced the book I've mentioned, Women Are Beautiful, a much-panned book that explored his fascination with the female form. Most of Winogrand's photos are taken of women in either vulgar or at least questionable positions and seem to be taken unknown to them, said one critic. This candid approach adds an element of disconnect between the viewer and the viewed, which creates awkwardness in the images themselves, said another. Now, it was this body of work which really sort of got me to think, I suppose, about photography in the 1970s, which I'm very aware of, having grown up in that decade. Because the film I watched raised this issue around this body of work, which I wasn't aware of. Looking at the photography now, it really does make you feel very uncomfortable. And I say that as a man, obviously, who grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, but as a man who's also worked in women's magazines with fashion photography and so forth. So it's not that I'm hypersensitive to these things, but I am aware of these things. And looking at this work now, it really reminded me of all the very worst aspects of 1970s photography and the kind of idea that people had of what a photographer was at that point. So I really recommend watching the film to see how you feel about that, because as I said, it really did make me think. There were other aspects, political aspects of his work, which are also brought to the fore in the film, which I wasn't aware of them. I think it's so easy to see Winogrand purely as and I hate the term, as you know, street photographer. But there was an awful lot more to him than that. And I think what this film shows is both good and bad. It actually made me want to go and pull out my Winogrand books, which I hadn't looked at for a very, very long time, and kind of reassess his work. Anyway, Winogrand was diagnosed with gallbladder cancer on February the 1st, 1984, and he died on March the 19th, age 56. He was interred at the Mount Moriah Cemetery in Fairview, New Jersey, and the Garry Winogrand Archive at the Center for Creative Photography, CCP, comprises over 20,000 fine and work prints, 20,000 contact sheets, 100,000 negatives, and 30,500 35mm color slides, as well as a small number of Polaroid prints and several amateur and independent motion picture films. Frank Van Riper of the Washington Post described him as one of the greatest documentary photographers of his era and added that he was a blunt-spoken, sweet-natured native New Yorker who had the voice of a Bronx cabbie and the intensity of a pig hunting truffles. You seem to be enjoying our listeners' letters, emails really, very rarely, actually never in letter form in the old school way. But you seem to be enjoying those, and we've had a lot coming in over the summer, so I thought I'd share a few with you. Do, of course, keep them coming. First one, Dear Mr. Grant. Well, how very formal. I'll keep this short and sweet. Every time I hear your podcast, I get excited about being a photographer, about teaching photography, and about the work I do, which I believe is meaningful to our community. When I listen, I often hear a voice in my head, yes, with a British accent, echoing some of my own thoughts about photography and the photo world, with warm admiration from Tony Chirinos. Hi Grant, reaching out as I listen to the podcast. I'm an architectural photographer. It's always interesting to hear other photographers in my field. I liked the soft eye approach Edmund Sumner came across well when the pair of you talked about that. Always tricky when photographers talk about equipment. That section wasn't so lifting for me. Well, you would know that that's probably, and I commented at the time to Edmund, the most we've ever spoken about cameras on this podcast in all these years. And I think it was only a couple of minutes. But anyway, I've found that in order to survive, I've had to diversify, which potentially comes with risks also. You may be interested to know that I'm helping a photographer go through IPEC small claims at the moment. That's IPEC. A manufacturer has used his images without permission, even putting them through AI to make a video. This is an essential area of control for architectural photographers. However, we don't like to talk publicly about it as it can put off clients. I help fellow photographers, pro bono, where I can help them resolve these issues, although it all depends what they have charged for a license fee previously. I'm afraid to say that many architectural photographers joined an archive which sells licenses for as little as £35, so about $40, for web use. So most of them can't do a thing about infringements, as the defendant can just say their work is worth hardly anything. It's really depressing that I can't help them. Best wishes, Nick. Another one came in. Dear Dr. Grant. It's all very formal. Please just say hi. It's fine. I listened to your podcast about 3 photographers to take another look at and why analog. Thanks so much for your podcast. I enjoy listening to you discuss your opinions on photography and magazines, and very much enjoy when you have Fiona on to discuss exhibitions she's seen. I will admit that I still do love to shoot on my film cameras. I love the slower pace, the sound of the shutter, the flick of the manual enhancer. I love manually focusing on my little Pentax and the imperfect images I get from it. I like the surprise light leaks in the process of loading the film. I like my contacts to this day. After thinking more deeply about it, I will also admit that paying for each roll and spending that money made me more cognizant of what I was choosing to shoot. It made me think twice before pressing the shutter, made me focus a little harder and take my time to get the shot right. I do think that helped me to become better at photography. If you'd have asked me this question 5 or even 2 years ago, I would have adamantly, stubbornly, maybe even viciously defended my love of shooting on analog cameras, and I would have disagreed with anyone coming at me with a love of digital. But now I've relaxed. I've seen the light. For me, it's not about which medium is superior. It's about which one makes sense for the specific scenario I'm shooting. There are things in my life that I will always belligerently defend and probably judge until I die. But at least for now, I've done judging people for their artistic mediums and am back in a phase of exploration and openness, which is probably where I should have been from the very beginning. If you've gotten this far, thank you so much for reading. Well, I have. I hope you have a wonderful day and look forward to diving into another podcast. Best regards, Sarah. Another one came in. Hello, Grant. I've been playing catch-up with recent episodes of the podcast and listened to episode 368 about the Nick Ut controversy with interest as I have just returned from a holiday in Vietnam. While in Ho Chi Minh City, I visited the War Remnants Museum, a building dedicated to the history and legacy of Vietnam's wars with France and the USA. On the museum's third floor, there is an exhibition of photojournalism made during those wars, as well as the work of many Western photographers, including the final frames of Larry Burroughs and Robert Capa. The exhibition gives equal recognition to the Vietnamese and other South Asian photographers who reported the war. An enlargement of Nick Ut's Napalm Girl is also included, Ut, according to the catalogue, having donated it to the museum. What I found remarkable about the exhibition was that, unlike other Vietnamese museums I visited, where the anti-imperialist rhetoric of the country's ruling Communist Party loomed large in every caption, here the photos, regardless of their provenance and the nationality of their creators, were all given equal attention and credit. If a regime such as Vietnam's can allow such a remarkably even-handed presentation of photojournalism about its past, I struggle to understand what purpose is served by the Stringer documentary. Is our understanding of the conflict and or the role of photojournalism improved by it? I have my doubts. For what it's worth, I believe Nick Ut made the photograph. But for me, what is more important is the photo itself. Once we start questioning its authorship, it would seem almost inevitable to start questioning its authenticity. And then we're on a very slippery slope. Best wishes, Simon. And then just finally, a message came in. Hi, Grant. I wanted to share the work of John Boletin in response to the question about whether there are enough photographers documenting the more challenging aspects of society, similar to Jim Mortram. I first saw his work, Tbilisi Raw, that's John Boletin, I think, in 2024 at Photo North, and then his talk in 2025 at the same festival titled, This is Not a Life, It's Just an Existence, and that came in from John Kenny. So, as I said, just a tiny snapshot, but I think you can tell how interesting and informed the letters I get are. And as I say, do please keep them coming in, because what it proves to me is the point of this podcast is always to instigate discussion and thought, and to do that we need to be open-minded, and that certainly seems to be the case. And of course I respond to every email and message that I get in. Just finally this week, time to say thank you very much to all of you who contacted me and said how much you enjoyed our 4 episode specials over the summer, in which I was reading from the book Inside Vogue House. And the sales of the book seem to have gone up as well. So thank you very much for that. Also, if you didn't check them out because you were on holiday and you weren't listening to podcasts, maybe dip back in. Each episode deals with a different decade from the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s in the world of magazines, editorial photography, and just funny stories. So thank you for that. We've got lots of interesting conversations coming up over the coming weeks. Fiona will be back, Bill will be back, and we'll also have a number of special guests. So that just leaves me to thank you once again for listening. Thank you for all of your support, I should say. No, thank you for all your support. That would just be ridiculous. Thank you for all your support. And of course, over the coming weeks in these turbulent times, do please take care.